All right, everybody, thanks for coming out tonight. We're going to go ahead and get started here in a few minutes. Before we do so, I think
that we do for the poll. We actually just released Global Emotions, which if you've ever seen those articles that talk about like Denmark being the happiest place in the world, we collect that data. And so it gets picked up in a lot of other places. So the poll is still a huge part of what we do when we think about capturing how people feel about their lives and how they feel about their workplaces. Within workplaces, many of you maybe have taken Clifton Strengths or Strengths Finder. If you've heard about that, I think we've had about 25 million people that have done that. So that's a large product of ours. And then our teams, which you'll learn a little bit more about tonight within technology, is our flagship product, which is Gallup Access, our customer portal. We have about 3,000 clients on there, and that's where we deliver Clifton Strengths, we deliver employee engagement surveys, performance management, and organizational culture. So all of that's a big part of what we do. We're about 250 people in IT. We have about 200 in software. We are, I have to put a plug for hiring. Christy's our recruiting. If you know of anyone looking, we'll add about 50 people this year. So we're growing a lot. We have a really diverse technical group, I should say. So when it comes to .NET with this group, for example, you're going to hear from Martinson, who works on our data lake team. And then we also, like I mentioned, Gallup Access. Gallup Access has a bunch of different technologies as part of it. Amazon Web Services. We have a group that does a lot of Java and Python with computing and analytics and reporting. And then another group that owns the survey and the portal, which is all .NET and Microsoft based as well. So we're super excited you're here. Martinson, I'm going to let you introduce yourself.
I have one, so.
You don't need this one.
Yes.
But this one's cool.
Let's see. Can everybody hear me okay? Okay, awesome. So I'm Martinson Ofori. I have been working in .NET for quite a while. Recently, I was more focused on Python, like Mac was talking about. Python is really great, so I've worked a bit in that as well. But for the most part at Gallup, I work on the data lake team. Everything data comes through our team, so that's a bit about me. What we are going to be doing today is extending Blazor components, and this builds a bit upon what our good friend Tim Ingledew started last month. So just by way of a quick introduction, if you've not seen that presentation, because Tim's presentation touched on that. So we'll kind of move into what our actual presentation is on, and that is Blazor components and component libraries, right? So what exactly is a Blazor component? Microsoft defines it as a self-contained portion of a UI with some processing logic to enable dynamic behavior, right? And it is implemented using both your native C# code and your HTML markup. And for pages, we just route them with the @page directive. So what happens is that Blazor is actually a component framework, right? So everything inside of Blazor is actually components, which means that if you were to build any component inside of Blazor, you can actually route it just by adding the page directive to the top of that. And we'll look at that just a little bit. the question then becomes, why would I want to use a component library? And there isn't a whole lot of advantage, quote unquote, to that, right? And the reason is simple. If you have time to build your own components, spend man hours, design your own CSS, but I mean, I know I'm not the best at writing CSS, so I'm not really happy with building some of those stuff. So if you can get a component library that has built a lot of those items for you, then by all means, that is where the advantage lies in speeding up your development. Now, the question is, why doesn't Microsoft build their own component libraries, right? And for that, I saw this blog, and I can't tell if this quote from the ASP.NET developers is true, but it's attributed to them, so I'll assume it's true. And the answer from Microsoft is really simple. They want innovation from the community, so they would rather spend time speeding up the framework itself, building out what the framework should actually do, than focus on components which the community can actually innovate and build upon. And that we are seeing a lot of from component libraries like Radzen, MatBlazor, Syncfusion, and all of that. And of course, there's some paid ones, some open source freeware, MIT license that you can always use. But the problem becomes, as you start going the way of component libraries, no matter how good the library is, you'd always run into a situation where it doesn't necessarily have what you need at a certain point in time. So then you might need to find a way to build upon that component library to get it to do what you actually want to do. So let's go into our live coding session now and see a bit of that. Now, I'm going to be using MatBlazor at a point in time, so if you want to follow along or anything, you might want to set it up. And it's just a few steps, doesn't take that much time. It looks like a lot, but I'll just go into that, do that really quickly, and then we'll get back and look at some of the things that we are going to be doing. So I'll open my Visual Studio here. And what I'm going to do is I'll create a new, for our purposes, let's create a Blazor server application. It doesn't matter what, whether WASM or server, but I'll call this demo for our purposes. Okay, and then just create that. We'll not change any of that configuration. And then just let that run. Okay, awesome. So for our setup, to get it to work and play nicely with MatBlazor, there's just a few things we want to do. First of all, you have to install the actual MatBlazor NuGet package, and that's really simple. Browse. Search for MatBlazor. Okay. Install the latest one. If you're on .NET 5 or below, you might want to install 5.2, I believe, because the 6 is built upon .NET 6. So then it might not play nicely with your application. The other thing we want to do is we'll go into our imports and then add the MatBlazor namespace. So MatBlazor. And then in our pages, under the layout, I believe, in the head section, we are going to add these 2 lines of code. And this is required, style sheets that are required by MatBlazor. and then the Math Blazor JavaScript. We'll add that in here. And in our program, we are going to register the Math Blazor services. If you're on .NET 5, it's a little bit different, but for 6, we'll just add this line of code in here, add the namespace for that. Quick actions using Math Blazor services. And finally, in our main layout, we are going to add the Math theme provider, which is what the okay, are we good? Okay, which is what the Math Blazor theme depends on. So by just doing that, we set up our application to run with Math Blazor. So that is all we need to do for this part. Now, the next thing we want to do is we'll look at some of our use cases. For our first use case, just a very simple one, right? How do we reduce code repetition with a checkbox list? And classically, what we've done is if you want to create a checkbox, really simple, you might probably do something like this, right? Where you create a checkbox for each choice and bind them to some field or property. Not a whole lot going on there. Currently, what you have probably done before, or what you probably do, is you would have the list of items you want to select from, iterate over that list, and have some methods which add or remove from the list, right? Really simple. Now, the problem becomes, how do we reduce code repetition? In fact, how do we, if we have lots of lists, items to select from, if you're in the business of Gallup where you create like surveys and all that, you are going to have a lot of choices for users to select from. So how do you go from having to do multiples of this to doing something like this, right? Really simple, and you don't have to do a whole lot, right? So again, our problem is reducing code repetition, and our solution probably is to create a Blazor component that accepts a generic list as an input and then creates the checkboxes for you, right? Really simple, not a whole lot to do there. So let's go into our code and then see how we would probably go about something like that. Again, this is just a really simple example for set. And then I'll override the hash code and equals as well quick actions and refactorings, generate equals and hash code. I'll probably use just the ID. Because it's generated at random, I just want to use the ID for comparison, right? So the hash code just this.id, and then when we compare, we just compare the two IDs. And then I want to add one last thing, which is how the string, when you call to string on this, how it works. Yes, so I'm to string, and I just want to return, for example, a string with just the summary and maybe the weather in Fahrenheit. Is that what they call it? So temperature F. Temperature F. And then add like this. So just so that we can use this. Now, what I'm going to do is I'll create a new folder here, and that folder is going to hold our components. And this can be called anything. I just prefer to call it that. And we are going to go into our imports and add a new namespace for components, so that whatever we add to that folder can just be accessible anywhere in the app where that import is used. So we'll add our new Razor component. Let's call it checkbox. Oh, so checkbox list, for instance. And think about what we need for a checkbox list, right? We probably need some items, so public list. For now, I'll just say string. Oh man, I can't type today. String items. Okay, get sets. And maybe we are going to select some items, check some items, so I'll say checked items, for instance, items. So this isn't exactly different from how we would do a normal checkbox list, right? But before we go ahead and add anything in here, what we want to think about is how do we get this to play with generic types, right? And it's very simple. We just add a directive, the type parameter. So a type parameter T, and now we can use that instead of a string, for instance. And then, because this is going to be a component that will be in a different page, we need to add these things as parameters so that wherever that page, this component is used, we can provide these parameters. And to do that, we just add a parameter attribute to the top of these items. Oh man. So parameter. Okay. And now we can think about how we would create our checkbox list. And the code isn't completely different from what we would do on a normal basis. So it might probably look something like this, right? So you iterate over your items, and then you have a label which takes the item and uses the toString function, for example, to display it, which is why I overrode the toString function in there. But again, you could write something so that any user of your component can apply their own toString function, for example. And now we need a check change method to actually add or remove items from this list. And again, it's pretty simple. It's the exact same code as we would have done if we were building this as a code behind in some page, right? So it will probably look something. We are going to have this component used in different places, right? So we need a way to tell our consuming app that something has changed inside of our component. So hey, re-render your view. So for that, we need an event callback. Usually it is whatever parameter that you are going to have the event callback on, and then you add change. That is Microsoft's naming convention for that. So then we'll have to add in a parameter, which is just an event callback, which takes the list T. So event callback list T checked. I think I'll just say checked items changed. Gets set. Okay. So I'm gonna remove this comment here. So with this, we have all the items that we need for a simple checkbox list, right? Some list of items, something to hold the checked items, and an event callback to notify the consuming elements, your parents, however you want to call it, that hey, I've changed the checked items. You might want to re-render your view and show us which items have changed. So how do we actually use this in our page, for example? So I'm going to go into this page that Microsoft has, and here it's just a table which uses the get forecast, blah, 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 to display some data. I'm just going to delete that so we can use that for our purposes. And now, because I have the component namespace added already, I don't need to do a whole lot here. I can just look for my checkbox list, and it's right there. And the only thing I need to provide it is some checked items and the items, right? So for our checked items, what I'm going to do is, instead of deleting what is already here, I'm just going to add 2 new, let me just call this, say, forecast list, for example. And instead of an array, I'm going to change this to a list. Probably do this same thing for our, let's call this maybe selected forecasts. Okay. And for our selected ones, I'm going to initialize that okay. And now our forecast list would be the items, and the selected ones will be our checked items, for instance. And now I need to provide, what is this? Cannot be used like a method. What am I doing? Did I add anything? Okay, sorry. So I need to just add forecast list. Okay. list, new list. Okay. And now, what I want to do is probably after they get their list, I'm just going to take that, my forecast list. My forecast list is probably just going to be this forecast.toList, for example. Right. So really simple. And now, if we were to run this, I'm going to add in just a few things so that we can see what is going on. What I'm going to do is I'll add a few diffs in here, and then just for display purposes, I would add in this. Okay, so just a card with, yeah, I'm going to use my selected forecast. Okay, so that we can see what is happening. But we will notice that, so let me run this, for instance. Let's see what happens. Okay, where's my browser? Okay, it's showing up here, so I'll push that here. I'll go to the fetch data. We'll notice that it has, oops, I probably didn't type in something correct, so I will come back to that. We'll notice that even though we can select some items, that nothing is displaying in the selected forecast, because as at this point, we are not doing two-way binding. We just added the selected items, so we are doing one-way binding. So what we need to do is, okay, so this is what was displaying that funky thing. What we need to do is to bind this to the checked items so that anytime something changes, the event callback will notify our this component, so show us what actually changed, re-render your view so that we can see what is happening. So we'll just rerun this and then see what happens. So now that we've bound it, if I move this here again, go to fetch data, and I select something, now it's going to show, let's see, mild or something. Okay. It's going to show which ones are being selected. I'll need to look at what is happening with this. So let's see. So selected forecast, we have a list which holds that, and then a forecast to list. Let's see. ID, and then the hash code. Okay. It's in that. All right. Let's go into our components. We'll look at this. Okay, so checked items change. If it does this, add this. Doesn't contain, add that. And then we make the callback. Okay. This is in the fetch data. In fetch data, we are creating that. And then forecast list. Okay. Usually, I'll need to look at the hash code again, see. Okay. All right. Let me just add. Item dot string and this. Let's see what we are missing here. So we have that set up correctly. This is also set up correctly. So in our fetch data, we have bound that to the selected forecast, and we have our forecast list, and then we are getting that. Okay. How to see what is going on. But for now, we are just gonna say move on and see how we would do the same thing with, say, ModBlazer, for instance, right? So for that, we are just actually going to reduce a bit of the code that we have here. So most of what we have is going to go away if we are doing the same thing with ModBlazer to build this checkbox list. So in that case, we might do something like this, where we don't need to build our own, add our own HTML for label because they already have that. So label becomes, say, item dot to string, and then we can maybe add the ID also as item dot to string, and then our check changed is going to be the same function that we used before. So check changed. And then for T, we probably want to specify that, hey, this is a Boolean. And because we've told it explicitly that it's a Boolean, we don't even need to use dot value anymore because now it knows that this is a Boolean event. And we can probably do that. So I'm going to move a few of these to the next line so we can see clearly what is going on. So this is how we would do the same thing with ModBlazer, for instance. If I run this, let's see. Okay, give me a second here. Why does it keep opening? Oops. Need to run that. Okay. So it's going to display it maybe a bit nicely than before because the classes and everything, the styles and everything from ModBlazer is added to this. And it's still probably not going to show the other one, but I'm not going to look at that now so that we can go ahead with the other example that I wanted to show. We'll probably come back to this later. The other one we wanted to look at, which is a bit more complex, which is why I wanted to move on from that one, is say you wanted to create a select, right? Which has some autocomplete and pagination function. Now, previously for selection, you might have, say, something like the code that we have here, where you can't really search for the items in there. You can just select singular values, and then currently you might do something like this. When it comes to MathBlazer, they do have something for you to do with no pagination, no multi-select, to say something like this, right? Where we can do our multi-selection, and we can also paginate if we have thousands of items to go through, right? So again, our problem is how to implement pagination and multi-select in a Blazor component. And here we can create a MathBlazer component which performs the server-side autocomplete, multi-select, and the pagination for you. So let's take like a really quick look at that and how we would go into that. But just before we do, we can look at like the MathBlazer page, for instance, and see like what they have. So this is their autocomplete, like I said, and it has this. You will see that the list ends at District of Columbia, but what has actually been provided to that is all 50 states. So if we scroll down right here, we have, right down here, there's all 50 states. And if we came back to search for, say, Wyoming, for instance, it's right there, but we can't actually see it. And we also can't select multiple ones. You can take a look at the API and all of that maybe later and see that. So what we want to do is maybe use some of what MathBlazer already has to create something new that will have the multi-select, the pagination, and still do the search like how we want it. So some of the components that we might want to do is to look at something like the popover, right? So mostly our select will have some sort of text field, so we don't need to worry about that. But if we need something to display, we can probably have a popover which anchors to some text field in, say, top center, something like this, right? That is how we probably want it to display. And then the next thing we're looking for is some components which already has that server-side pagination that we want. And that we can look at something as simple as a table, right? So if we look at the table that MathBlazer has, it's, for the most part, if we go through, we see that, so the table has this pagination thing already, so we can kind of look at that to implement what we want to do. So let's look at how we will do that in our code. So I'm going to add a new component, and I will call it, let's see, custom select or something. I can't think of a better name right now. And let's look at the elements that we wanted. So first of all, we want, this time I'm going to start from the HTML part, and then we can go. We want some sort of text field, which we are going to use in our search, right? The text field is going to be of type string. And then the input type will be inputs inputs.text. Variant, let me say outlined, just so that it draws around that. And then probably when we type, we want to see the search happening immediately, so that they already have a parameter for that immediate. And if it's immediate, we don't want to hit our server too many times. So maybe we might want to add like a debounce. So say a debounce interval for now, I'll say 1,000 for instance. But a better idea would be to add a parameter for that. So parameter, say debounce interval. So that is going to be a public int. And then just in case it is not set by the consumer, I'm going to initialize that to say 1,000 and then put that here. And then the most likely thing is that whatever label that we want this to display would be the label on the text field itself. So we probably want to add a parameter for that as well. Parameter for label. And that is going to be a string. So public string label, so get set. Then we can have our label. We didn't add that in here, so I'll probably add it after this. So label will be that. And then the next thing we want about after this is to look at what other things we can use. We already talked about the popover class, so we are going to add the mad popover. And for the popover, we are going to add some things in between that, right? So let's say, for example, that we add, say, something. I can't spell that right, something. And then what we are going to do is, like I said before, components are actually the whole Blazor framework is component based, so you can actually route your components. So we can maybe add a page directive to the top of this and see how this is looking like right from the onset. But for the popover, we need some way to tell it that it is open or closed. So what I'm going to do is to add a new field, say Boolean is open, for instance. Basically do that. So I'm going to write like two small methods to do like open and close, for instance. So for that, say I might probably do like something like, say, this. So we have toggle open and then copy and paste this. Let's call this close, for instance, and then set this to false. And then what we can do is when we enter our text field, when we enter the text field, so for this I'm going to use, let's say, the onClick event of that and say that toggle open. Toggle open. Okay. So this is the first part of what we need to do. I can run this, and then we'll look at what we have using the test page that we just talked about. So really quickly, okay, now it's shown here. So not fetch data, I think I called it test. So we can actually come here and we see that it does open something, but it's not really looking how we want it to look. So we need to add a few things to the pop over, like for example, the anchor origin, which I think was origin dot, I think bottom center. And then the transform origin would be top center. Top center. And then we want the width of that to be relative to whatever it's been anchored to. So if we hot reload that and then come back in here, we see that now it's showing kind of, sort of what we want it to look like. So we'll go ahead and change a few things to start kind of trying to get where we want to get. So I'll close this, remove the page route, and then add our parameter, type parameter t, and we actually don't need this. So we already talked about using a mat table for this, so I'm going to add like a mat table, and I'm going to add a few things in here before we look at what the mat table needs. So first of all, like when it has no records and that kind of stuff, this is what we would have. It's showing some reds because we haven't provided enough of the data that it needs. For our row template, we are probably going to want to do something like, say, this, which is when you want to display the data, data label, I just put name, but we actually don't even need data label. It doesn't really matter, but whatever is provided to the table, we are going to use the toString of that to display the values. And then what we want to do is to start thinking about what other parameters and methods that we need to implement for this to work. Now, for that, I'm going to start adding in a few other things. For example, in our text field, for now, we've not told it what to do when we actually want to search. So what we can do is to add, say, value changed. Value changed. And when the value changes, we want a method that we are going to use to actually do something, right? So for now, I'm going to write a very and call this on search or something like that. And at this time, I'm just going to provide it with a string. Say, let's call it search text. And then we'll say this dots. We don't have anything to hold the search text, so I'm going to create a private field. Say string, call it search text, and then say that, hey, I'm going to explicitly set this to be equal to that. And there are different ways of doing this. I'm going to put some breakpoints so we can see how this is happening, which is why I'm doing it this way. But to do is, if we set the search text, we actually want something to be searched. So how to search in table. So we are actually going to do something in here. Now, we need to provide that to on search. Yes. So now our text field is going to do some search, right? Now for our math table, we also need to provide it a few things for it to actually work the way we want. And one of those things is we said that we want it to be multi-select. So we are going to say multi-selection. Of course, you can say equal to true, or you can just say multi-selection. It doesn't really matter. It just sets it to true if you add that on there. Probably if you hover that, we want to highlight dense so that the list is a bit more compact. And then, just like we did before, we want some selected items. And then if the selected items change, we want something to happen. So what we are going to do is I'm going to add, because we are going to be doing some searching, and it's most likely that most of the elements we'll provide in whatever search that we'll do will be unique in some sort of way. I'm going to use a hash set for that. So then instead of what we did before, where we had the selected items as a list, we might say use a hash set and then have, say, after the bounds, I'm going to add a hash set for selected items. And then the same thing for, like we said before, event callback, if the selected items change. And then one last thing is, let me move this below that. I like it to be arranged that way. And then one last thing is, again, just like we did before, if the selected, how to actually add and remove items from our selected items is a method that probably looks something like this, right? So we provide the selected item, and then if it is not in the list, we add it. If it else, we'll remove it, and then we would call the callback so that the parent will re-render its view, right? And then for us here, what we want is to actually provide what we've added to the math table, right? So what we are going to do is we are going to add in the selected items, and then the selected items changed. We are going to provide those to our actual table, and then our T for that, which is why it's screaming, is going to be the same as the type parameter that is the generic type that is provided to the component. Now, we've provided all of these to the math table, but we are still not telling it how to, where it's going to get its data from, and how it's actually going to do the search and all that. And for that, we need to add a new method for to do that. What they have, which gives the data for server-side pagination, they call it server data. And server data is a function which supply a function which does the filtering, blah, blah, blah. So table state, and then returns it has a parameter called table state and returns the table data, right? Now, for this server data, it takes only the table state and returns the table data, but we actually want to search, so then we'll need to extend this. So what we are going to do is we are going to implement something for us to use this. Now, the way I would go about this is to create our say private async task, I think it was, table data, and this is T for server data, and that is table state. Let's call it table state or something. Right. Now, what this, so we can now provide this to our, as the server data that is going to need. But for us, what we want to do is we are going to write a very similar function as a parameter, which the user or whatever is going to have the table states and the string as parameters, do the search on their server, and then return that data for us. So for that, our function will look maybe something like, so I'll come here after the event callback, and look something like this. So very similar to what MadBlazer had, just that we are adding a new parameter string. And then what we can do is, in this server data, we are just going to return await this dot server data function, and then table states it's called, and this dot search text. So now we are going to use the previous field that we had added, which we are setting explicitly here. But how do we actually reload the server data so that this search happens? So what we have to do now is probably add a reference to this table. So we'll use the @ref directive, and what we are going to do is add a new field. Let's say this is going to be a mad table, which takes the T, and then let's say our table ref or something, and then put it in here. And now what we can do is, whenever a search happens, we can say that this dot table dot reload server data, right? So if a search happens, we set the search text, we reload the server data, and by reloading the server data, it is going to call this server data, which we are saying that when a reload happens on server data, don't do whatever, actually call the server data that has been provided, and also provide a search text that they use to filter that. So we'll kind of put some breakpoints so we can see some of that happening. Now, a few other things we want to add is, previously we saw that the popover was opening, but we've not actually done anything to close it. So what we are going to do is add an overlay to this. So let's use the mad overlay, and then it should be only visible if using the is open, and then what we are going to do is we are going to use the click of that to say if I click this, if I click the overlay, then actually close that. So toggle close. Okay. So the overlay will draw an overlay on the page if the user enters, and then if they click on that, it's going to actually close the popover. Let's see. So we have all of that done correctly, I believe. So label the bounds, search text. We've done our on search. We have our open, toggle open and close, selected items, a callback, and then all of that. Okay. Now, for us to actually use what we've done, okay. We'll go into our, I think it's the fetch data page that we were using. I'm going to comment this out. And then what I'm going to do is in the weather forecast service, I'm going to add a new method for searching. And for that, it's just this very simple method, which, let's see, which is very similar to what they have here, just that this time I am going to, I'll just delay just 5 milliseconds to kind of simulate if we are calling an API or something on the server. We'll take the search text and then we'll trim it to lower. If it's null, string.empty, we'll set a random seed so that we can generate like the static list. Yeah, so this is where our problem was previously. I didn't add ID should be indexed, which is why it wasn't displaying correctly in the previous one. Oops, I dragged something. Okay, so ID would be index. We don't need the date. We are not using that for anything. And then when we return the result, we are going to use length to only return those that contain our search text. So really simple method. And then when we go into our fetch data, what we are going to do is we don't actually need this anymore, but I'll leave it just for now. We are going to add a new method, and this method search forecast is going to call the search forecast async. So the parameters for that is the table state and the search text. So it calls the search forecast async with the search text. The total of that is going to be the count of whatever is returned by that. And then for our pagination element, we need how many items you display, which page I'm on, blah, blah, blah. So we are going to use the page size times the page so we know which page we are on. And then we are going to use our length to actually implement some of that. But in a real world, of course, that will be done by your API or however you would implement that. So I'm going to do that and then have that. So this will be our server data function. And then now, instead of all of this, we actually don't need this anymore. I'm going to take that out. Instead of this, I am going to use the what did we call it? Custom select. Custom select. And then what we give to that custom select is going to be really simple. So for example, we can increase the debounce if we want. I won't do that. Let's say our label is weather or something. whether we are going to bind it to bind selected items to, let's create a new or I'll leave this for now and then create a new one. Say, let's call it selected forecast V2 or something. And then use that, bind that to this. And then for our server data function is going to be just the get server data, right? And then just like that, we have our component. Let's see. Okay. Let me add this, move this here so it looks okay. We can even specify, it's not asking for it, but I'm gonna add the type anyways. So, okay. So that gives us our custom select, and now we can actually call that and see how that works. So let this build. Oops, what is happening here? Event callback. It says that, give me a second here. Cannot convert from this to, because server data function, bind selected items. Let's go into our custom select. Let's look at that. It says, because I gave it a list, I forgot to change this to our V2 is supposed to be a hash set. Yes, so, okay. So this should stop it from screaming. And now if we come to fetch data, we go in there, it opens up this nice thing, we close it, it closes, we can select some items, and if we close it, those items are still selected, and then we can also paginate through that, and it's loaded correctly. Let's go back in there, look at what we have, and for the selected forecast, we wanted to actually display the V2, not the previous one. So if we come back here, fetch data, if we select any list of items and we close this, it should display those correctly. We can search for freezing, and after a second, is going to 500 milliseconds is going to search for that. Warm is going to give us that. So how is this actually working in our component? We can come in here and then place our breakpoints in here. Let's look at, so search, and then server data, and in our page, we also see when this fetch data, we also see when this gets called. So what happens is when we run this, and then first the server data, the MathBlazer server data function is called. So MathBlazer calls that for us on the first run. And what it does is our search text is null. So it calls the get server data function, and then it goes into our weather forecast service. Because this is null, it's going to set it to string.empty, blah, 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 go over all of this, do the stuff for us. We'll create all that fun stuff, return that, and then, of course, our hash code, blah, 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 it's called to compare those items to see which ones are equal to which ones, and that is that. So that is the order of events. The reload server is called. Then it calls the server data function, which calls the function we created. It uses the search text we've entered. So if we enter like something now, again, it's going to be the same thing. So search text on search is called, we call the reload server. Reload server calls the server data. Server data calls the consuming applications function. It does all of that fun stuff, and then goes back to that, and then does the comparison, and then if there is anything, that is that. Now, the other one was, like I was saying before, previously in the weather forecast service, we had told, we had overridden how it's what compares two items, and we were using the ID. So what we were supposed to do was, in the weather forecast, you need to also provide the ID as the index, which is what I've added now. So if we come back to our page, fetch data, and say, I'm going to enable this one. I'm going to uncomment that. Let me add a, and then let's say will now be this guy, for instance. Now, I'm going to remove the breakpoints I added previously. Okay, let's go back into our custom select, remove those breakpoints as well, and then run this. Now, our select should work correctly because now we are comparing with just the ID and not that. And of course, if we refresh, because it generates them at random, it's going to generate a new list. But if we select, it will still select them correctly, and all of that. So that kind of brings us to the end of everything. Hopefully, I've not taken too much time. So thank you, and any questions?
I think maybe, Mark, if you can hang on, since we do have a sheet here, and maybe you can be here after some of the
Yes.
for you. Okay,
Yes.
keep it moving since we're
Perfect.
over a little bit.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
You can 35 minutes.
Great.
And then can you hit that link that I sent you earlier?
Oh yeah, sure.
Perfect. Yep.
Right.
Do that. And then select the screen.
Sure. Cool.
Yep.
Yep.
That's fine.
That works. Yep. So let me know if you can't hear me, but let me start real quick.
If it's not, try one more time. That's for the room PC. All right,
Yep.
there we go.
So today here we have gathered about showing you some tips and tricks and writing about unit tests in Visual Studio. So I'm Ashish Pandey and I'm working here since 5 years and I'm a senior software developer this January, and I also work with leads in managing the project and all. So basically we all do debugging, we all do various things on Visual Studio 2022 and 2019, 2017 and all those stuff, but I will be going you with some demos and we will be going in depth in understanding all those stuff. It will be really helpful for someone who is new in team or someone who didn't know some things before. So coming to that, I just wrote a creative title over here like T to the power of 4. I just came up with that name. So if you see, the agenda of this meeting, so we will be going through all this stuff. So before I start that, I just want to ask you one thing, like there was this journalist, okay, so this journalist goes to a developer and he asks to that developer like, hey, do you know what is this, what is it about the bad code here? Like, can you tell something like what is it about the bad code here? Do you want to describe it? Do you know what that developer told that journalist? No comment. So if you think about that, the first tip is to write good comments, okay? So if we go over that, but that's what it is. But coming to the first tip that Visual Studio has, not Visual Studio has, a developer has. We can never go a day without debugging things, okay? So debugging is like a breathing to a developer. So when you go to the real life world, you start with debugging things. So we will be going over this trace points, conditional, dependent, temporary, and data breakpoints in just a minute. But before I step over that, you know that a developer always, like a developer, most of the developers, they know that we have to hit some breakpoints. But do you know the breakpoint is on the line of the code, right? A line of the code. But line of the code can perform many actions, you know? So if you have a breakpoint on the line of a code, that line of a code, you can change it according to what you need it for, okay? So that's how comes with trace point. Like, you know, there is an action on the line of the code which we are performing, and that line, I want to trace that functionality in the code. So I would just trace that action. So that action which is performed on the line of the code, so I'm tracing that. So that is called a trace breakpoint. Now there is a conditional breakpoint, as the name suggests, and we will be going over all those stuff in the demo. But then if you see the other thing which I will be going over in a minute, it's like inspection and watch and quick watch, call stack, immediate window output, and locals. So all this stuff is mostly used for to help the developer. But in this thing, if you know the difference between watch and quick watch, so watch, what it does, watch window has so many variables which you can see at once. But what is quick watch then? Like, you guys might have used already like along many times, but the main difference if you see about the watch and quick watch, like you can have many functionalities in watch, like you can search the things, like if you say null reference exception, you can search over there. But in quick watch, dialog box opens, and you can go in depth on that particular variable. It's only a specific variable, but not like on many variables. And now in that particular variable, you can go but until you close that window, you can't debug it further. But on watch, you can watch on a variable. So that's how this is, the definition is on. And we know about the call stack, but many people don't, many people, they know, like, we know that we have a stack frames which are attached to it, but when you go to one exception, you can directly hit on that, you can assign a breakpoint to that, you don't have to navigate further and further. So these are all tips which I will be now demoing. So these are all like, most of the time, we keep reminding ourselves like, yeah, these are there, but the thing is, what are those purpose for? Like I have heard about this, like when the data breakpoint, the data breakpoint is like from one functionality to another functionality. If you want to go from one code to the another code and then another code to the another code, and you can do that with like temporary breakpoint and with the data breakpoint. Now for new developers, they suggest that the person who is new to the team or new to a code base, they can use data breakpoint in determining where the data is being changed for that particular variable type. Let's say if you have a class, which I will show you right now. Oh, doesn't it? Okay, let me. Okay, that's fun. I just need to click on the, I don't know why this is not working now. Okay, I got it. Yep, I think it was in presentation mode, sorry about that. So, yep, won't waste much of your time, but now we will start with the demo. Like if you see that I have a demo 1, which I would just run over here, and if I run it, it says weather app, but you just don't mess with the names. I just added some Marvel movie names over here, and the actors, because I'm a fan of both Marvel and DC. Sorry about that, but yeah. So if you try it out and if you see that, so now when I was telling about the call stack and stack trace, when you, call stack and stack trace, like all those stuff. But if you see here, like when you add a condition over here, you can add that thing. Now let me execute this, okay? So when I execute this, there is a condition thing over here which you can add, like if the respondent summary is this, then only it will hit the breakpoint. That is conditional breakpoint. Then you have temporary breakpoint, like you can add that. Here there is an actions like, hey, this code got hit, and you can see that in the output window. So when you see that, and when I hit this F5, and I already added a breakpoint over here. If you see in the locals window, and if I hit an F5, so I'm showing you how the data breakpoint gets affected. So all of these are here, which are like remove breakpoint once hit, this is temporary breakpoint, and this is a dependent breakpoint. Like you know the code flow, like you know that the service method has to be hit when the API is hit. So you know the code flow, but you just want to know that this is being hit. And for that you need dependent breakpoint. And that is what it is. Like it will show you the line of the code. And you have to actually assign the breakpoint so that it will show here over in the list. So that's one thing. But coming to the data breakpoint, you need to go in the locals window and you need to generate that values first. So you know that the first thing, you know that the request you are sending to the API is the right request, but you don't, and you want to save it as the right response in your database. But now you don't know where it got changed. You don't know what happened. So for that, you need to go to the locals window and you can just get to the response. You can go to the 0 and you can add like for the Iron Man, I will just say you should break when your value changes. So when you hit that now, there is one breakpoint over there, which is called and I'm changing the summary manually here, and it breaks. So this breaks when you know that this is breaking on this value you changed. You can directly go to the class rather than spending hours like, hey, I want to figure out where this is being changed, and I'm figuring it out in hours and hours just because I don't know what the code structure is, you know. So this is very good handy tool for the developers who are new to that code base and all the stuff. So this is all about breakpoints. Now I will continue with the presentation, but as I am here in the demo, I will just continue with the inline with the tools thing. You know, there is this ILSpy. If you don't know, this is recommended by Visual Studio 2. You can go and check all the packages you want for that. You can even close this and close this. Okay. Now when you go to the program like here, I mean this is my program, but you can right click it and you can say open code in ILSpy. I don't know what console code has Microsoft written, so I can go to the ILSpy and I can directly see the code for that. It decompiles and it shows you the code. So this is one of the good extension which is recommended, but you know, if you don't want to install extension, Visual Studio has its own thing. You know, you can debug the symbols. So you have three types of symbols. So one is Microsoft symbols, you have your own internal symbols which you use in your company, and the third is the external libraries, which let's say the Newtonsoft.json or something which someone has written in the GitHub and you're using it, and Microsoft is also recommending it, like Unity, it was there. So this kind of things when you got stuck with, like when you get stuck with like, hey, I don't get this is weird, you are not getting any 3 or not getting any 403 or not getting any 404, which you can figure out by yourself. But this is something which you can't figure out. This is an exception from the server. This is an exception from the libraries. Now, if you want to figure it out, you know, there is a tool, handy tool, and that is in the options class. And if you see here, like in the debugging, and here I already have disabled my okay, load the symbols. So I have already disabled my just in code, because you have to do that first, because just my code means you are only enabling what you want in a particular code. But when you want to load the symbols, and this is slow, so please bear with it. Okay, so now here, and let's say, you know, this the drawback of loading all the symbols is the performance gets decreased, the build time gets decreased. You have to remember that. So for that, what you can do, my solution is a low size over here, so it can do it really quick, but you have to load only specific modules. If you want to load any specific modules, you can specify the path and you can load it, or you can load it at the runtime too. By on the call stack, you can just right click and you can say load symbols for this. So I will show you how we do that. Like if I am here in the library, and I will just change my project to the console app. So let me start up this project, debug it. It's coming over here, I can do an Fi, type a number 12, type another number 12. And if I do F11, you see I'm going in the math library. If you did see that, this not math library, but this is system.io thing. It's console.writeLine function, and it debugged it because I have loaded all the symbols. And that you can see in the modules window over here. You can see that what the symbols have been loaded, and you can right click on this. You can see more information on that, like why it hasn't been loaded. You can see this information over here and all this stuff. So these are all status which is showed me symbols have been loaded or not. And if you want to load it over here, you can also try it again. But I don't think it will open here because the files are not there. So some things which are not there, you can specify direct files. And like here, you can right click and you can see open file location. You can find the file location for that. So what is PDB file? Now I will say what is PDB file. PDB files are actually used as the debugging to like it has all the loaded symbols which is used in the places of DLLs and executable files. So these are the things which we are requiring to do that. And there is a good documentation you can search online. This is very good. If you have your own internal library which you want to debug, you can take that NUPKG file and you can keep it in your local folder, and you can use the package sources. If you know that there is a package sources tool over here in the debug options. Okay, I think I'm at the wrong place. Yep. Tools, manage NuGet packager, and here in the package manager settings, and here in the package sources, you can specify your own local folder where you can get your NUPKG file and you can paste it. But remember, you can increase that version to some extra version, and then here you can specify your own package resource, and that will actually make sure that you are using your own NuGet library to debug that. And so that's one thing about the PDB file, load symbols, and all the stuff. So the coolest feature which I have found in the Visual Studio 2022 is about the hot load, I think, hot reload. Yeah. So let me check if I can enable that. Okay. So if you see, this is a hot reload folder, a hot reload application. So what does it do? What does it do? You can just go to my controller and you can say like, hey, let's execute it. That will be fun. So try it out, execute, and then okay, that has a condition breakpoint. That's why it broke over there. But yeah, let's go over here, and I want to say like Ashish, break when Ashish Pandey changes. That doesn't happen. But if you see here, it allowed me to write that. There was a good feature before hot reload came. I think it was in Visual Studio 19. In a different version, and that was edit and continue. Now hot reload, what it does, how many times you have to restart your application to just change something and retest it, right? You have to retest everything, you have to rebuild everything like 3, 4, 5 times. I mean, like big applications, they take a lot of time. I think this feature is fully available for .NET 6. But I think there is still some issues with the .NET framework versions, which I also face some things. But I'm happy at least that for my unit tests or for my something which I want to test it out, and if I want to change my asserts in between, I can do it real quick. So that's what brings me with the tips and tricks of the Visual Studio, that I have shown so many things over here, but I will show you one more important things about the editor settings. So if you have seen that in my project here, you are seeing some var explicit type and something like that. So I will show you one more good thing about here. So many people, I think, which I have seen the code, and most of the time is like we forgot to change the namespaces and Visual Studio doesn't complain about it. We forgot to remove some unused variables, Visual Studio doesn't complain about it. And you can configure it by yourself. So let's say you have like var, I will just add something, okay, and I will just use system, which I am not using, and I will use just using system.runtime. And now if you see, just observe that, and I will just press Ctrl S, okay, so it didn't do anything, that is good. But I would do run code. Now you see my unused variables and my unused thing is gone. Now that is because I have run the code cleanup. And you can configure that. You can configure that code cleanup. You can specify what you want to code, what you want to generate, and all those stuff. Now every company has their own standards which the leads decide on what rule set their code should run. But if you are working on a GitHub project, you can set your own rules. Visual Studio gives you the capacity about that too, and that is where I'm coming with is the things which you are seeing with the var is options. And if you go to the text editor, and if you go to the C#, and if you go in the advanced, and if you see there is a display inline hint parameters over here, and if you see in the code style, there is a general which gives you that, hey, I don't want people to use var. I want they want to specify the whole class name or object name. So I can specify here what I want to configure. I can generate the editor file config. You can add a new editor file config, and it will replace that. So these are all the things which you can do with this Visual Studio, and you can. I'm not 100%. I'm not 100% like I won't recommend using the generator editor config unless you want to, but what I would do is I would generate my own settings, and there are some cool Visual Studio extensions which you can use to do that, like StyleCop. It's on the Visual Studio website too. You can use that, and you can add your own rule set project to project. Let's say if you have a Lambda, AWS Lambda, which you don't want to be using the same settings, you can do that. But this is the generic thing which we can do for ourselves. And this can be even local. Unless you generate the editor config and you push to the Git to make it global, you can keep it in your way to write a better code, or you can indent those spaces and you can write all those stuff, So these are some things which really caught my eye. Like people tell me like, some people tell me like, I have like so many warnings, like 1,000 warnings, I want to fix it. Visual Studio has this feature long back. And this is, if you see this, and if you see that there is a IDE 088008 which is coming. Now wherever the IDE 0008 is there in your visual, in your solution, those will all get fixed in one click. And just click on solution, show potential fixes. I mean here, okay. So that's how it is when I use my mouse track. And use explicit type instead of var, preview changes, document project solution. People do only one, I can do all in one solution, and it will fix all the things which is of IDE 0008. And I do this one click, and it will show me all the solutions which is there here, which is using that explicit variable type, and I just click apply. It's done. It uses all the things which it is, so which it should supposed to be. So that's the thing. And people mess the namespaces. How many people have messed the namespaces in the project? And there is no way you can find it out until you work on that code repository. And like I'm pretty sure I did write the right namespace, but I do see, oh, why is this code not hitting? Why this is not, when I'm using this reference site, is not showing up because of the namespace. And now how you can do it, I have messed some namespaces here. If you see in my test project, there is a demo test project, which is like namespace is weatherapp.controller over there. Then there is namespace of unit tests, and there is namespace of unit test. I mean, that is the right unit test. But if I right click it, and if I sync namespaces, if you see, it has automatically changed all the namespaces. I mean, this is just a one simple requirement which we can add in our pull request. And it would save some time in figuring out where is my file when I am trying to refer it. So this is just what it is looks like over here. So yeah, that is all about the tricks. Now I would say something about the test now, okay, and I think we are just about to finish. So many people, when they say about unit testing, and unit tests sometimes take a lot of time to load, unit tests take sometimes too much things and capacity. The rule is first, if you think in the order, like fast, isolated, repeatable, self-checking and timely. Now, fast run in milliseconds, isolated, no dependencies on the database. So why you want a test project to be dependent on your database? Like it is simple and common thing. So I won't go over this thing, but one notion which everyone says about is high code coverage measurement can't determine the quality of the code. Yes, that is true. Like quality of the code is a very deep subject if you think of. Higher code coverage is it's you can say like it's a tributary, it's a river which is just adding to an ocean, okay? Because higher code coverage can only benefit that specific line of code is covered. But is that specific line of code has all the assets which you want? Or can you think of all the assets which you can and which can embed into that line of the code, and you can think of all the possible cases which a QA can think, which a user can think. I mean, still we miss those things. I mean, like so in understanding better assets, there is not a single answer. Like a plus b is equal to n, 2 plus 3 is equal to 5. So that is only one assert which I did, and that only covers, and if I say higher code coverage, that covers 100%. If I only cover 2 plus 3 is equal to 5, but there is also one thing which is called 2 minus 3 is equal to minus 1. Am I covering that? Does plus of minus 1 gives me the right answer? So these are the things which we need to ask. This is just a basic thing which I am telling here, but these are the things which we need to ask. These are the things which we need to find in the other unit test framework. We have 3 unit test framework which we commonly use: MS test, NUnit and XUnit. Now if you see those things, facts are always true. Theories you can specify inline data, but then you can come up with 2 more things which is called class data and member data. Now the drawback with inline data is you specify your parameters, let's say, but there is a big class of 15 variables, 15 data types in it, and you want to test all of them. You need something which can take all that. Inline data takes a specific amount of parameters, but the class data, they can take the whole class. But now you say, so there can't be any drawback. I mean, there is always a drawback with using one or the other, and the drawback of using class data and member data. So class data requires an IEnumerable of object of array type, and you can specify that and you can work on that test. But coming to the member data, you know, that takes a static object of the IEnumerable object. But the problem with that is, and I will show it in the demo. The problem with that is, okay, so these are my demo tests. This is just inline data. We won't go over that. But if I go to the okay, that was inline data. So this is the thing about the class data. Yeah, this is the class data because it is a class. And if see, it doesn't throw me any error because that's not, it does. And if I run these tests, that will fail my tests for sure. Okay. Did it run? Yep, it failed my test. Why? Because it says like, hey, you have an error. Yeah, I know that. That's an error because I missed one parameter over there and it failed because of that. But I need a valid parameter to pass it. But now if I pass it 1, that will pass. But the thing with that is it throws runtime error. And if you want to do better on that, you can use combination of this thing like theory and class data. And they morphed it to theory data. Or theory or member data, and they morphed it to theory member data. So you can use the combination of theory and the class data, and I will show you in the test theory data. So if you see here, there is a theory data attribute. Actually, there are the attributes over here, and you can try many more things about that. You can explore XUnit a lot. I mean, so these are some things which are like test generally data and you add it, and in the Azure you can do that. But here it will show me compile time. If you see, there is an error, like I'm missing something. Okay, that saves my time. But you can use this combination of tricks if you want. You can explore XUnit and you can do all this stuff, and you can try to implement all those stuff. From me personally, I use them based on my requirement. I use most of them. If I want to use the class data, I use the class data. If I want to use the fact, I use the fact. Because fact, I know that there is an input and there is an output, and I want to assert only one fact. I don't want to assert like all of them. I don't want to assert a number of possible cases. I don't want to assert an if and else. If I want to assert an if and else, I would just use the theory with the inline data, and which will have a Boolean flag, and I pass true or false. But if I want to assert 5 parameters or 7 parameters, and I know that class will grow, I will use the class data. So that's the thing. So that's about unit testing. And now the last topic is about your own custom dashboard for the AWS. So I have already opened, have my dashboard over here. So if you see, this is my custom dashboard. Now, when you know about something, like you are pushing something and you are deploying something and you want to know if this is being logged properly or not, okay? You want to know the right way. Actually, what makes sense in this world is what we see, we want to understand that. Not what my colleague sees or what some other developer sees, okay? So I want to understand the graph which I want. The pattern recognition in our brain is different and in a different way order. And also the second thing is to save time, you need something your own stuff. Like you are working on only 3 projects or 4 projects, and you are only on 3 or 4 servers at a time. You don't want to hover over all the servers and you want to find that particular log and you want to look over that. That will save you like 7 minutes of your time or 10 minutes of your time to go over and look for that log. Now what you can do, I am pushing something and I want to know how much CPU it has consumed, how much memory it has consumed, how many hits it is getting. What I could do, I could go to that server, and this is also a benefit for QA, because QAs have access to all this stuff because they also check those things. So the thing over here is you can go over your own dashboard. Like this is my Lambda, which I have already triggered when I was preparing for this demo. And if you see that for 3 hours there is my SQS topic, which is a queuing service of FIFO, first in first out, that is hitting the Lambda to send the messages over. So I have an SNS topic which is subscribed, that is a notification service which Amazon provides. So if you see that there are so many things over here, and let's say if I want to create my own custom dashboard, I can just click on this, add to dashboard, and it will show me which dashboard. And I would say custom dashboard, and it will add to my dashboard. The whole thing related to that particular Lambda, because there are hundreds of Lambda, let's say in your company or in your organization, and if you want to just specific 5 Lambdas, you can just add it over here. I have already had a log over here, and every of this thing, it will automatically be in 10 seconds. And if you want to add a widget, you can add it. Like here, you can, let's say if you want to see how many messages have been sent in a particular minute, or how many emails have been sent in a particular minute, and you just need the number, you don't need the graph, you can directly add this gauge, because you can say like, hey, 1,000 messages have been delivered, 1,500 has been bounced or blacklisted, something like that. So you can specify, you can create your own widget in this AWS dashboard, and if you, where it is located, that also I will show you. If you've seen the CloudWatch, and if you see in the dashboard, and you can create a create dashboard over here, and okay, I will save and continue, and I can create here right now Ashish's dashboard, and that's how, okay, I can't use the apostrophe. That is a good feature of Amazon. Okay, cool then. So this is what it does, and if I do the pie and if I do the metrics, and it will show me like, okay, there are so many of lambdas which you can choose of, and I would say, okay, by function name, okay, cool, this is my function, okay, I would just use the concurrent executions, okay, create it. I can use even the math, I can use even some formulas. If you are good in statistics, you can add that, you can filter out that. So yeah, these are all the things which it is, and just continue over the slides on finishing my presentation. Okay, just a minute. I think I was in this slide. Okay. So the thing which I haven't shown you is about there is a, if you go to the, so if you go on the website of the XUnit, you can see this. If you want to change from MS unit to NUnit or NUnit to XUnit, there is a good table which will say you what you need to use in those things. And toolkit for AWS, which we did go, dashboard, which we did go, awareness. So awareness, this is basically on the developer circle. Like there are many times we use obsolete packages. There are many times we use, like how I was telling about the load symbols. You don't want to load some symbols which can cause security threats. You know, you have to be sure of what you are loading. And the leads and the team and they have to decide what you can do and what you can't do with your code. If you are running a organization or if you are running a code base, because you don't want your code to be open for anyone to get into that, right? And there are so many useless packages if you see that too. So just be aware of that. And as I have already spoken about the copying code, when we copy code, we don't change the namespace, and Visual Studio doesn't give you warning about that and all those stuff. So these are all the references which I had, and if you have any questions, yeah, you can just shoot me out. Yep, that's it from me. Thank you.
All right, we will jump right into some giveaways. Can I borrow your computer?
Oh, yeah, sure.
I think you need a Twitch stream. I want to watch you debug because I think I would learn something.
I'll take that. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Thanks. Okay. We have two $50 gift cards and a $25 card.
Yep,
And
a little tumbler.
Tumbler. You want to start with the tumbler?
Sure.
Okay. Well, let me.
You gotta specify so someone's like, oh, I should have waited till the, yeah.
Yep.
I stopped the screen share if you are.
That's fine.
Okay, cool.
I've forgotten what my username is. There we go. Got it. Okay. All right. We've got a fair number of people here. So this is from the RSVPs that came from the meeting. If you're RSVP'd, you're in the list. So for the tumbler, got Alexander. All right, there he is. All right, got that. Congratulations. All right, and for a $25 card, this is an Amazon or?
Yeah, they're all Amazon.
Okay.
25 and 250.
Cool. Jill.
Oh. You can win.
All right, and for the first $50 card, John Haro, who's usually our camera guy, which is why we're using a really crappy camera tonight, is not here. So he loses. Too bad. He's a good guy. Christy.
I'm not gonna take one.
You're not going to take one? Okay. Rigged. Chris. There he is. All right. And for the last $50 gift card,
Does it have a chance to be us?
not you, buddy. Marcus. I haven't seen Marcus.
Does it have a chance to be you?
I think I'm in the list, but I wouldn't take it.
Don't choose. Okay, now choose.
Tim was here. He is still here. Yeah. All right. Congratulations, Tim. Thanks to our speakers, Ashish and Martinson. Thank you. Jeez, sorry about that. Yeah, so normally we, after the meetings, we'll go and grab some drinks and whatnot. The folks that usually do that for us are not able to be here. I can cover the cost tonight though. So where do you guys want to go? I guess I don't know the area. Is there a good place to just sit down, chat, and have some?
Rat is over here.
Okay.
There's also the mattress factory, and there's also a DJ's. Just right, all of those are right off of tents.
Any preferences for any of those? Is anybody able to go? I guess number one. We got one. So this is looking good for the user group bank account. Okay. All right. Well, just stop by. Just come up front afterwards if you're interested, and we'll figure it out. So, thanks for coming, everybody. We will do this again next month. And like I said, I don't think I have a speaker. I have to check my sheet to be sure, but I'm pretty sure there's no speaker on there. So if you're interested in speaking, let me know. But until then, we'll see you. Take care. Thank you. Good presentation.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.